All right, so when you are drawing really anything, it's good to think of a kind of grid over it. Remember when I was talking about our cup still life and even the sugar skull? And I'm sure I've mentioned it other times. I talk about extension lines, sight lines, and just reference lines. So these are kind of an imaginary grid we can lay over an image to help us keep track. It's like plotting points in math class. Keep track of where we are and compare how different parts of the drawing relate to one another. So we just took notes on proportion. This is internal proportion. It's comparing one part of a artwork to another part within the same artwork and seeing what is the size relationship, what's the scale. Is it twice as tall? Is it as wide as it is tall? Is it 1/3 tall as it is wide? And since we are starting with just a study here of a single object, a good place to start is just draw a set of crosshairs. And you want to draw these pretty lightly so that they will erase easily. If you apply a lot of pressure, it gets a darker line. It grinds more graphite, more lead into the fibers of the paper, and it can even dent the paper, emboss it. And that's what makes your pencil lines hard to erase. And these are just reference lines, so we don't want them when we're done at the very end. Now, I'm looking at one of these photos of an eye. So these 3 photos of eyes on the slideshow are all looking directly at the camera. So the pupil is pretty centered. So I'm just going to place the pupil right at the origin point, right at the crosshairs. Remember in math class, if this is a graph, if this is the y-axis and this is the x-axis, 0, where they intersect, is called the origin. Now, I'm also going to mark kind of the general placement of the highlight in the pupil, because that highlight is the brightest point in any of these photos. So I want it to stay bright, and the brightest I can get without adding some kind of opaque media like paint is the white of the paper. And even as lightly as I can draw, sometimes you can lose that and you can't erase all of it back. So the brightest highlights, I usually draw a faint outline so I don't shade them out on accident. And like I said, these are looking directly at the camera, and it looks like there was even flash or light behind because their pupils are pretty small compared to their iris, which I can actually measure. So it looks like the pupil is centered and a little bit smaller than 1/3 of the iris. Remember, the iris is the colored portion. So I'm going to, if this is centered and it's about 1/3, then I need this size circle to fit here and to fit here. And then I can go just a little bit outside of that because it's not quite 1/3. Then I'm going to, so there's my iris. And again, they're looking straight at the camera, so it's pretty centered. So now I want to draw the outline where the actual eyeball is exposed, where their eye is opened. Now I am looking at the subject's right eye. I know that because their nose is over here. So this is the inner corner. Now, the iris just barely touches this line, but I can't see this top curve of the iris because the upper eyelid is shadowing it. So that's how tall this eye opening is. Now, if I measure that and I compare it to the width, it's about twice as wide as it is tall. So the edges of my eyeball can extend about there to there. Now I'm going to imagine one of these sight lines. I'm actually holding my pencil up to the photo on my computer screen, and I'm holding it perfectly horizontal, like the horizon, parallel to the bottom of my screen. And I can see that the outer corner of the eye is on the same level as the pupil, but the inner corner is a bit lower. So the outer corner is right here, but the inner corner goes down some. And then it actually forms this kind of slight kidney bean shape there. Gonna connect all that. Pay attention to this curve. So at the photo I'm looking at, the highest point of the curve is directly above the eyeball, above the pupil, I mean. And there's my highlight. Now I can see there's a slight crease, a slight shadow right here, where the bottom of her eye is kind of tucked behind her eyelid. So that's the bottom edge of her eye socket. And I can see the crease above her eye where her eyelid is folded. And it's pretty close to the eye opening on this inner corner. And then it goes up. And the highest point of this curve is to the right over here. So I don't want to go any higher than right here as I move this curve down and around, and then it gets a little extra curved over here. And let's see, if I measure the height of the eye again and compare it. So if I measure this width on my photo and I'm marking it on my pencil with my fingers and I move it to the top of it, that is about the bottom of the eyebrow. And see how the curve of the eyebrow goes. It's about right there. And if I draw another extension line right here, so that is a vertical line tangent to the inner corner, this edge of the eye, I can see the eyebrow actually starts there. It's even with the front of the eye. It's a little thicker there, and then it tapers off. So that's about where my eyebrow is going to be. Now I'm ready to start adding the shading and the details. So I am actually going to use, I've noticed I've got a wooden pencil. I'm going to use the side of my lead and just do a very light gray over the whole thing, except for the highlights in the center there. That I want to make sure I keep white. All right. Now I'm going to use my finger and smudge it so it's all nice and smooth and even. Okay, so the reason I did this, now I have a reference point for value. I can say, okay, is it darker than this light middle gray, or is it lighter? And it also helps me to kind of see how the curves of the face are going to continue into the rest of her face. All right, so a couple of things to look out for when drawing eyes. On the bottom eyelid, you can actually see a slight rim here of and this is the edge of the bottom eyelid, and it's usually highlighted unless you have your light source coming from below. So it's brighter. Not as bright as the reflection in the pupil, but brighter than its immediate surroundings. And I'm looking at the photo and I see that there is a pretty dark shadow on this edge here, but it's not as dark over here. And then from this highlight, that is actually where the eyelashes are going to extend from. They do not extend directly from the eye, they extend slightly below it from on this edge of the eyelid. But remember, our eyes are actually spheres, although they're sunk into our skulls some. But if you put your hand flat and put it against your cheek and just put it over your eye without pressing and keep it stiff like a board, you'll notice that you can feel your eyelashes, but you can't really quite feel your eyelid because your cheek and your brow extend beyond it. And that's to help protect our eyes. But it means there's a lot of shadows and slight curves. And there's actually a slight shadow here. And then it fades out into the surrounding skin. So, and this gets a little sharper right here where I have a slight crease. Use my finger and smudge that a little bit. Make sure I don't lose the rim. Okay, and now I'm gonna start adding in some of those eyelashes. Okay. Okay, so one thing to look out for is this rim. And notice over here, it just kind of fades out into the skin. It's a little brighter there. Okay, and then the other thing, because our eyes are round, there's a bit of a corner here. You can see where the white of the eyeball actually meets this little nook in the corner, and that's usually darker. And there's almost a slight highlight there, and then this is shadow. And remember, our brow extends beyond our eye, and our eyes are round, and they're shadowed by the curve of the eye itself. The curved surface, the light's going to wrap around it. It's not hitting the entire surface evenly. And it's shadowed by our eyelashes and our brow. So the white of the eye is not pure white, and it gets a little darker towards the edges of the eye. The iris is a bit darker around the edges, but it's not an outline like a coloring book. So pay attention to the details of the shape of it and how it fades into the rest of the iris. My pupil is the darkest. Slight highlight right there. I need a better eraser, but it's fine, it'll work. Okay, now I'm going to do the shading of the eyelid before I worry about the eyelashes. It's really dark right here. And there's a highlight here. So that is where our skin, our eyelid is curving outward and to go up in around our brow and into our forehead. So it's curved a bit here. So there is shadow. And over here, this is actually the side of the nose. So this is a bit darker and then it fades into the cheek. It's a highlight here, it's brighter. Okay, and now right here, it's pretty dark, and that's because the eyelashes are overlapping there. You can see a couple here and there. And then the eyebrow. So just kind of start layering up pencil strokes. You need to sharpen your pencil. You'll get a finer line. If you want to get the texture of the eyebrow, it's really important that you do take the time to do it by layering all these pencil marks, because you can see the variation where it's darker in some areas of the eyebrow where more hairs are overlapping, so that it's basically blocked out the skin. But other parts, you can see little parts of the skin, like it's sparser in the center here. I can see a couple of hairs that are a little low lying there. And there's my eyebrow. There's my eye. So start general. Lay a grid or crosshair. Map out the general shape. mark highlights. Shade middle gray over all of it. And then start adding details and more specific shading. And my crosshairs kind of disappeared on their own. If there's anywhere where you can still see a little bit, just erase it out and then go back and touch up the value.